Hi and welcome into the course 7 Keys to Victory. In this course you will learn the 7 most essential guidelines for finding the right move in almost any chess position. Does it sound too good to be truth? Well, frankly it will not make you a grandmaster or especially a world champion, but it definitely has enough power to advance your level of chess to 1-200 rating points above your current level and to bring yourself into the category of expert players. I'm Igor Smirnov from the Remote Chess Academy, and I'm really excited to start with this chess journey together with you. Now, what are those 7 keys to victory that I'm talking about here? These are the most fundamental rules of chess. There are plenty of the rules out there, but if we talk about the most core, most important guidelines of playing a chess game, there are not that many. In fact, there are only 7. I call them principles, and if you studied any of my previous courses, such as the Grandmaster's Secrets, the Grandmaster's Positional Understanding, or anything like that, then maybe you already know some of these principles. But nevertheless, whether you have already learned some of these principles or not, in any case, this course will be highly useful for you. First of all, there will be a lot of new ideas, and secondly, even if you're already familiar with some of these principles, it's not only important to know them, but also to bring yourself to the level of advanced players. The thing is, let me use an analogy with running. Like, everybody can run, but if you compare an ordinary person with a world champion, an Olympic champion in running, the Olympic champion has the skill developed to a much greater level, so he can run faster and his technique is a lot better. And it is the same thing with the chess skills. Like, even if you already possess a certain skill, well, if you possess it currently on the level of club players, you can still perfect it and bring it to the level of expert players, to the level of master players, and so on. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing in this course. It is not just a theoretical course, where you will learn a bunch of theoretical ideas. No, these are just 7 key principles, basically. But we will really work them out in details. And there will be a dialogue. I will be asking you the questions, and you'll be able to think yourself and to apply the knowledge that you learned right away in practice. Therefore, at the end of this course, you will not only learn these 7 key principles of playing the chess game well, but you will be able to apply them directly in your chess games right after you finish studying this course. You will learn them while studying the video lessons. You will also be able to practice them in the practical part of the course, and overall, I'm pretty sure that if you take it seriously, and even if you digest even only some fraction of this information, that will already be enough to advance yourself quite significantly in your chess development. Now let's talk about those 7 keys to victory and how they originated. In order to do that, let's go to the checkmate position and then we'll work it backwards. So we'll see what is a typical pattern of a chess game. Alright, so that's not a real chess game, it's just the scholar's mate, the fastest way to deliver a checkmate. And let's just realize in general what's going on. And then we'll see what are the general principles that guide the whole game of chess. So first of all, I've just made these few first initial very simple moves, and now white created already the checkmate threat. We want to capture the pawn on f7 and to deliver a checkmate. And let's say if black wants to cover his king additionally with the knight, then white will probably advance the pawn forward to kick away the knight and try to get to that f7 pawn and therefore to the king afterwards. Alright, again, that was not a real game, it's just the illustration of how the chess game can possibly come to the end. And now let's work it backward and see how should you play chess. First of all, the goal of a chess game is to checkmate the opponent's king. However, you can't do that directly because the king is covered by a lot of defenders, such as the pawns and the pieces. And therefore, before you get to the king, you have to attack and possibly capture all of those forces that surround the opponent's king, because they all are potential or existing defenders of the king. And that already formulates the goal of the chess game and also the first most important principle of the chess game, which is the principle of attack. It says that attacking moves are the best, and if you can attack anything in the opponent's possession, do it. because anything, whether it be pawn or a piece or a king itself, anything is a good enough target for your attack. Alrighty, that was the first already very important takeaway. And now let's work it backward, because not always you can attack. So let's go to the very beginning of the game and see how the attack was created on the first place. Let's even go to the very beginning of the game. In order to do that, let's focus our attention on one piece for now, just on the bishop, and let's see how the bishop took part into the attack. It's just not to distract our attention for too many of the different factors. So originally, when the bishop was standing on its initial square, it was not doing anything. Of course, it is not attacking anything, it has no squares to go to. But when white advances the pawn forward to e4, now the bishop already controls this long diagonal. So that already makes the chances of this bishop to take part into the attack greater. If anything, any opponent's pawn or piece will ever appear in the diagonal of the bishop will be able to capture it. And therefore, by allowing the bishop to control greater quantity of squares, you maximize the chances of this bishop to take part into the attack. And in the next moves, once the bishop was advanced further to the c4, you realize that now the attacking potential of this bishop became even greater. Now, in addition to this initial diagonal, it starts controlling one more diagonal, and therefore it doubles the chances of this bishop to take part into the attack. So any opponent's piece or pawn or the king, if it ever appears under the fire of the bishop will be able to execute the attack, perhaps with the support of the other white pieces, like it happened here with the support of the white's queen. Now, so we can conclude how we can possibly prepare an attack. You prepare an attack by activating your pieces, by putting them on the positions where they control the greatest quantity of squares. I call this activity. And that formulates the second most important principle of the chess game, the principle of activity, which says that in order to prepare your attack, you need to put your pieces on the positions where they control the greatest quantity of squares. Therefore, there is the greater chance that sooner or later an opponent's item, such as piece, pawn, or the king, will appear under the fire of this piece. And to summarize the whole thing, there are only two most essential ideas of a chess game. The first idea is that in order to win in a chess game, you need to attack. You want to attack the opponent's king, the pawns, the pieces, and actually anything. Anything in the opponent's position, you should try to attack and capture. If you can attack right away, that's the great thing. If you can't attack, then you need to prepare it by increasing the activity of your pieces, in other words, by putting them to the positions where they attack the greatest quantity of squares. By the way, the same thing happened, as you can notice, with the white's queen. Originally it was on the d1, was doing nothing, then it was advanced to f3, where it was starting to control a number of squares, and therefore it could also take part into the attack. So those are the two most important principles of the chess game, principle of attack and principle of activity. Essentially, that's it. You already know the entire chess strategy. But of course, it's not the end of the story, because there are different situations and there are different ways to execute these two most fundamental ideas of a chess game. And we'll talk about in the next lessons, we'll see what are those keys and how exactly you can follow these two most essential ideas of a chess game. I'm looking forward to talk to you in the lesson number 1, where we will discuss the first key to victory.